I encourage you all to buy the book, Fighting for Honor. I have purchased 2 copies myself. Page 160, end of the first paragraph. Thus, it is only because Ekpe is one of the best documented of the African closed societies that it will be used as a point of comparison, but with the awareness that these characteristics would have been shared by any of the hundreds of paramilitary societies in Western and Central Africa. This comparison will prove useful for unpacking some facets of capoeira Maltas. As previously noted, in Biafra, where my family is from, among the most prestigious closed societies were the paramilitary leopard society, such as Ekpe, which was in many communities open only to those individuals who had proven themselves in battle. Ekpe was a graded society with levels of initiation that played various roles in Biafra, including facilitating trade, artistic development, and law enforcement. The Ekpe had a segmented organization with each community having its own lodge, and each lodge existing as a part of a far-reaching network that allowed for coordinated efforts and safe travel of initiates to other areas of Biafra. This format allowed the Ekpe to maintain order between independent areas and therefore exercise great authority over trade, especially in the interior of Calabar. Thus, beyond the paramilitary roles being emphasized here, it is important to note that at times Ekpe played economic, judicial, and political roles as well. However, at the ritual heart of Ekpe was the tapping of the leopard's lethal grace for authority through both artistic and military power. Artistic power was developed through ritual emblems such as special hats, knowledge of dance, combat, and literacy. Although society meetings were closed, occasional public dances used to entertain the general community and display grace in dancing masquerades were important to the ritual function of Ekpe. The awe inspired by the use of leopard hats and dancing only enhanced the threat of very real judicial sanction, as the Ekpe was devoted to the making and keeping of law. These societies often enforced legal codes in their communities through the enactment of secret vengeance. The leopard society was the traditional executioner society, men who killed convicted murderers or launched preemptory strikes against outside enemies. Like other leopard societies throughout West and Central Africa, those in Biafra often used special knives to kill their victims in ways that appeared to be leopard attacks. The Ekpe also collected fines from transgressors of societal norms and violently punished both internal offenders and external enemies. Rio's Biafrans were not unique in their previous experience with potential institutional prototypes for closed societies. Many of the Bengulas in Rio carried with them an experience with initiation schools from east of the Kunini that could have provided relevant blueprints, as was the case with many of the Congos, Cabindas, Minas, and individuals of other nations in Rio. Because many of these institutions were similar in structure and function, and available data on the early development of Maltas are lacking, it would be impossible to trace any direct influences from particular regions of Africa. What is clear, however, is that African capoeiras built their associations along a similar organizational model as Ekpe and these other West and Central African closed societies. Rio's Maltas shared common elements with such paramilitary closed societies, particularly graded initiations, esoteric knowledge, segmented organization, ritual emblems, periodic recreation, and the enforcement of communal justice. Okay, so what you kind of see here is that there's several things associated with Ekpe, which, by the way, was perhaps the best documented of the African closed societies to date. You see secret vengeance, killing in ways that look like leopard strikes with special ritual knives. You see political, economic, judicial power being gained as one proves themselves in battle within this prestigious closed society, which is based around warriors, and these warriors often became rich people because the society respected their mind, body, and soul. And keep in mind, this is from Biafra, where the highest scoring or achieving or more educated demographic of Americans are from. In fact, capoeiristas rather, lived on the fringes of society more often. On page 166 at the bottom we find that capoeira was one of the most persecuted African cultural practices in the 19th century. Ample documents from the police forces and related bureaucracies provided a detailed picture of the waves of repression that struck capoeiras. At the same time, capoeiras were also integrated to varying degrees into the structures of the dominant society, revealing a certain level of begrudging accommodation on the part of Rio's political institutions. And it goes on into very interesting things. In fact, let's just hit 167. Bottom paragraph. In the same period, capoeiras may have increasingly turned to augmenting their unarmed skills with sticks, knives, razors, and rocks. The use of weapons by capoeiras led to greater resentment by the Brazilian authorities. So you see these transferable skills that come from Africa to the Americas, and they're refined in Brazil while it's being suppressed. Of all the people suppressed by the slave system, those who were uncontrolled martial artists and revolutionaries had it the worst. And I'm your modern day equivalent, obviously. So we go to 176. Second paragraph, weapons in capoeira. Rungadas's description highlights the use of knives as a distinguished marker between ritual practice and street fights. Although the unarmed martial art would remain at the core of the jogo to capoeira, the use of weapons became an auxiliary skill in the wake of escalating violence that erupted after the creation of the Royal Guard Police. The second decade of the 19th century appears to have been a turning point, marking the capoeira's more widespread adoption of weapons, including sticks, knives, razors, and even rocks. So as things got more serious, the true martial artist is always forced to put the emphasis back where it belongs, on the traditional weapons. Okay, so I don't want to take this much longer than, asked me. I don't want to read too much of the book. So let's just end with this third paragraph, 177. The other weapons were straight knives and navalas, folding knives and razors. The early technical use of these weapons may have come from any number of sources, including Iberian blade work, Kimbabasian knife work, or even the tradition of knife fighting from the far northern region of Angola. Certainly bondsmen would have noticed the knife fighting skills of Portuguese and European Brazilians who fought in the cloak and dagger style of Europe. However, it goes on to say, the most common bladed weapon among African capoeiras in the first half of the 19th century was a simple odd-shaped knife called a silvlau. Visitors to Rio noted the proficiency of bondsmen in wielding these weapons. As Walsh describes, their faca, or long knife, they use with tremendous effect. Sometimes they hurl it as an Indian does a tomahawk with irresistible force and drive the blade at a considerable distance through a thick deal board. So basically, weapons were part of the martial arts, knife fighting, etc. And where a lot of the grappling and the striking and the cultures of domination and hunting and this kind of ritual assassination, secret society assassination, for these groups of Africans came from Biafra, where my family's from. So you see the accompanying moral code I speak about in 11 through 14, at the beginning of the book. You go on all throughout the book. It talks about the different ways the capoeiristas fought against their oppressors, and how the Angolans and the Biafrans were kind of the biggest groups. They stood out the most, and the Ekpe society had perhaps the best documentation about them. So it gives you a very clear view into this region, which is in one of the most populated nations in Africa. The most populated by Africa. Nigeria. Okay, so when you look at this whole thing, yes, this is the essence. And also, these martial artists did martial arts throughout West and Central Africa, throughout all of Africa, North, South, East, West, and they adopted their style and adjusted it when they saw how the Europeans fought, which is exactly what I've done traditionally with Mantu arts and, leopard arts, horse arts, things of this nature. So a lot of people don't understand how serious it is with these institutions. They don't understand our cultures. There's so many cultures. Nigeria, there's over 350 languages spoken there. So rich, full of, culture and life and the nuances between different cultures that people don't understand and things lost in translation. And that includes miscommunication. There's mistranslation and miscommunication. And then there's deliberate misinterpretation, fabrication, falsification, and misreporting. When you consider all this stuff, a lot of people just get sucked into the system and abused. And the staff at a lot of institutions, they deal with people with developmental disorders, psychiatric institutions, deal with special children, special needs, disabled, whatnot. People get sucked into these systems and they get mistreated, like a motherfucking hurricane. And I think it's rather abhorrent. And, when you uphold a system of honor the way I do, and you believe in being the right hand of God, so to speak, setting things straight, and to see these lowly, disreputable, indecorous, ruffian brutes mistreating people, getting paid well by the state, by the system, and being allied with other scum. There's no words for it. And you look at this thing, right? Masses of scum collaborating together as far back as the eye can see. Then there was some of these societies were pretty good guys. But then they let the politics get to them. They lost their way. The accompanying moral code, sacred morality. Resist, people. Defy. And by all means, transcend.